I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about the creation of the universe according to Plato's Timaeus. To continue my journey examining the mind, also called consciousness, the soul, or spirit, I turn to the ancient Greeks, specifically Plato's Timaeus. In the Timaeus, Plato weaves a likely story of the origins of the universe and the things within it, from the stars to the elements and finally to the human being. While the Timaeus is not as well read today as some of the other Platonic dialogues, it was the only text of Plato that had been translated during the Middle Ages into Latin, right up to the 12th century, making it influential in the development of astronomy and also Christian doctrine. It is also among the few works of Plato where he presents a metaphysics, since his primary concern is the ethical and in that way the social, though he must have felt that he needs a metaphysics to undergird what he proposes to be the ideal ethics and politics. It is a fascinating peek into how those with so little possible knowledge strive to make sense of the cosmos. These are early days in the history of knowledge. These ancient thinkers make do with inventive accounts, though they are by no means disinterested, objective views. These ancient thinkers make do with inventive accounts akin to myths and stories, and they are by no means disinterested objective views. Plato aims to explain but also give meaning to human existence. He assumes a teleology, be it extrinsic or immanent, that things happen for a purpose and that purpose is good. Specific to Plato, this assumption makes sense because of his doctrine of the forms, which he lays out in an earlier work, The Republic, which we will get to, but let us take a look at the work itself. The Timaeus opens with a conversation between Socrates, Timaeus, Critias, and Hermocrates. Socrates has just delivered a long speech on politics, on how an ideal state should be, and it is now Timaeus' turn to edify the group with an account of how the universe came to be, right down to the creation of human beings in a turn towards metaphysics from politics. What started as a conversation with Socrates summarizing the ideas laid out in the Republic became a monologue when Timaeus started speaking. This in itself is unusual for the Platonic dialogues, since they tend to be really dialogues with the to and fro of people speaking to one another, and not complete soliloquies. But what is even more unusual is that the one doing most of the speaking is not Plato's leading man Socrates, but instead Timaeus. Socrates describes Timaeus as an aristocratic leader who has mastered the entire field of philosophy. Critias tells us that Timaeus is an expert in astronomy. Critias actually gets the next Platonic dialogue all to himself, where he was supposed to tell us about a 9,000-year-old war between the Athenians and the people of Atlantis, the legendary Atlantis, which is a lost city. The Critias dialogue is a fascinating little tale full of world building, but spoiler alert, it cuts off before it gets anywhere. Plato might have got bored, or perhaps the remaining pages were lost. Fortunately, in the Timaeus, Critias gives us a sneak peek, which is also a second prelude after Socrates' first prelude, which was a summary of the key points of the Republic. Solon, who was a wise man and a poet to boot, went to a temple in Egypt and was speaking to some priests who were also antiquity scholars. He was telling them about the Greek myths of the first man, when one of the old priests stopped him, saying, "Ah, Solon, Solon, you Greeks are ever children. There isn't an old man among you." Solon was taken aback, but the priest explained that the Greeks are young as a civilization because they have been destroyed time and again by fires and by floods. Because of deviations in the perambulation of the heavenly bodies, huge fires destroyed the land. Those living in the mountains are especially badly affected, while those living alongside rivers and seas, because of their water, were saved during these fires. Then there were the floods sent by the gods to cleanse the earth, which kills those living by the waters, while those on higher ground were saved. Because either writing has not yet been invented, or if it has been, then the literate were killed each time with all the records lost. It meant a reset for their civilization each time. While this short prelude by Critias often does not merit mention by those recounting what the Timaeus is about, it has a twofold significance for the Timaeus. The first is that while it is expressly about the Greeks, it is really about the importance of writing and its associated record keeping. Transmission of information exists before writing was invented. Information was transmitted orally, where stories were told, remembered by someone, and then retold. It is why some of the oldest tales still extant today are in verse, since their rhythm and other musical properties made them easier to remember. However, transmitting information orally is unwieldy and unreliable. Hence, if writing did not exist, then what knowledge is gained by each generation mostly dies with them, since knowledge does not get handed down genetically. What has been learned in one generation must be relearned by each new generation, retarding the advance of humankind. The invention of writing is thus a landmark moment in the history of humankind. Now, knowledge gained in one generation can be reliably handed down to subsequent generations. Some of these knowledge will be hard-earned, and it now meant the next generation need not once again pay the high price of learning it the way their forefathers did. This in turn gave them the capacity to gain yet more knowledge, since their survivability has been enhanced by the previous generation's knowledge. What the previous generation had sown knowledge-wise, the future generations are able to reap. And over many generations, the accumulated harvest is compounded. This is the true inheritance of humankind. For did not George Santayana say that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it? With such an understanding of how previous knowledge can now be captured for posterity, it seems Plato is now ready to do precisely that, to write and hence preserve his metaphysics about the very start of time itself for later readers. And so he begins Timaeus' monologue on the creation of the universe. The creation of the universe of course predates the invention of writing, so there is no way that Timaeus can have any true story to tell. However, he makes a series of analytic deductions to tell a likely story, a story which might have happened at least in its broad strokes. Some of the premises upon which these deductions are built are unwarranted, while some are at least plausible. Among the most controversial of these premises is that creation requires a creator. Timaeus speaks of a supremely good Demiurge, a craftsman who brings order to what was initially chaos. This implies that prior to the work of this Demiurge, there was already matter, which was housed in a receptacle, both of which origins Timaeus leave unexplained. The Demiurge brings, with its craftsmanship, intelligence. By intelligence, Plato means a mathematical structure. As you may recall, at the gates of his academy was a sign forbidding anyone who does not know geometry from entering. Mathematics holds a pride of place for Plato, an importance which he inherited from the Pythagoreans, which predated him. Hence, it is not surprising that Plato places great emphasis on the harmony implied by ratios in mathematics. Timaeus weaves a complex story of ratios from which the orbits of the heavenly bodies are devised. The shapes of the various entities are geometrical, with the universe taking on the most perfect shape of a sphere, so that things are equally distributed with no gaps between its contents. Only 4 elements had been postulated at this time: fire, air, water, and earth. All things are composed of them. The universe is alive and complete, itself an animal because of its life. Timaeus tells us it is created based on a model. This model is perfect while its copy, the universe, is not perfect. Wherein does this model come from if the universe itself did not yet exist? To understand this requires us to understand Plato's theory of forms or ideas. In other writings, Plato posits a realm where perfect forms of things exist. In this realm, there will be the perfect form of love, beauty, the good, and perhaps of natural kinds like human beings or fire, more real than the particular instances we encounter in our phenomenal world. These forms are the very essence or definition of things. The Greek word used by Plato is eidos, commonly translated as idea, and the eidos is what defines the many imperfect particulars of that form, the essence of what makes those particulars identifiable with the name or category they are placed under, a one over many. To speak of a realm is itself not quite correct, since the forms are intelligible, non-sensible, and non-spatial. The realm is not a place. It belongs to the realm of ideas, itself an idea. The forms are not substantial, they are intangible. The Demiurge does not create the model, but he creates a substantial image of the model, which is the universe. Plato's theory of the form is mystical, with its meaning and ontology still debated today. Perhaps a good way to understand the forms and the model is that they are blueprints, ideas which as ideas are perfect forms of the things they are forms of. Blueprints and ideas are not material, though they are what the creation of material things can be based on and brought forth by a craftsman. And so the Demiurge does so, but why? He robs order out of disorder simply because order is better than disorder, gives the cosmos intelligence because intelligent things are better than non-intelligent ones, makes the cosmos spherical because spheres are uniform in shape and uniformity is better than its opposite, and bestows self-sufficiency because it is better to be self-sufficient than dependent, complete because it is better than incomplete, unique because its completeness entails its uniqueness, as summarized by Richard Patterson. For the cosmos to be intelligent, it has to have soul, and so Plato's cosmos is ensouled. This soul is created from a harmonically proportionate mixture of sameness, difference, and being in two intersecting circles, the circle of the same and of the different, which gives it cognition of being and becoming. Time only came into existence with the movement of the celestial bodies, their orbits an image of eternity. The souls of individual living things are made from the residue of the soul stuff of the universe and then are embodied. A.K. Rogers explains that the forms themselves, since they are immaterial, have no movement, and since they are eternal, are timeless and changeless. Any and all movements come from the soul, be it the soul of the universe or the soul of living things. It is the essence of soul that is self-moving, and since it is the only thing that has this power, from soul all motion whatsoever, original or derivative, must spring, explain Rogers of Plato's account. These movements from the soul are initially harmonious, but are thrown into disarray by the soul's embodiment, as the body is subject to internal disturbances in their internal bodily processes and external disturbances from its sense experiences in its environment. This impairs the soul's cognition, though its harmonic functioning can be restored through nurture and education. Timaeus next explains the elements. While Plato does not use the word atom, and translators translate what he writes as corpuscle, for ease of understanding, I am going to call the fundamental particles things are made of as atoms. The atoms of the elements have faces made of triangles which form different three-dimensional polygonal shapes. The atoms of fire are tetrahedral, air octahedral, water icosahedral, and earth cubic. The atoms of fire, air, and water, because of their similar half-equilateral triangles, can transform into one another, while those of earth cannot because they are made of isosceles triangles. Because of their shapes, they act on each other in different ways, with fire because of its sharp tetrahedral shape being able to cut through the others, for instance. Since there are no gaps in the universe because, in the words of Aristotle, nature abhors a vacuum, the atoms of the elements cut or crush one another. The shapes of the atoms of the elements simply are what they are, brute facts necessary in the sense that they have their shapes due to the mathematical structure of nature. Even the Demiurge cannot change this, though he can use his intellect, or in Greek, nous, to persuade necessity to go the way he desires. This brings us to the third and final part of the Timaeus, which is about the cooperation between intellect and necessity in the psychophysical construction of the human being. The Demiurge did not create the bodies of living things, though he created their souls. He delegates the creation of the physical bodies to the lesser gods which he created. For the human body, different bodily parts are assigned different parts of the soul. The immortal, rational part of the soul is sequestered in the head, the manly and spirited part the chest, and the appetitive part in the stomach. Other parts and organs support the soul. Their design are through the intellect of the lesser gods who, understanding how materials behave, design them accordingly, persuading or manipulating the necessity of the material's behavior to conform to their intentions. This account suggests that Plato already recognizes a dualism, where material objects have to necessarily obey the laws of nature, of cause and effect, while the soul, that has intellect or nous, is itself a fundamental irreducible category, a force unto itself, one of agency in the universe. As noted earlier, most of Plato's dialogues are not concerned with metaphysics, since its primary concern is with ethics, by extension politics, and are discourses about how we, human beings, can lead the good life. The Timaeus is one of the few that is entirely a metaphysical account, but Plato concludes with a link between metaphysics and ethics. The ending pages of the Timaeus are about the human body's mechanisms and the diseases that can afflict us. He then exhorts us to maintain our physical and mental well-being. Timaeus says, "There is but one way to care for anything, and that is to provide for it the nourishment and the motions that are proper to it. And the motions that have an affinity to the divine part within us are the thoughts and revolutions of the universe. These, surely, are the ones which each of us should follow. We should redirect the revolutions in our heads that were thrown off course at our birth by coming to learn the harmonies and revolutions of the universe, and so bring into conformity with its objects our faculty of understanding, as it was in its original condition. And when this conformity is complete, we shall have achieved our goal, that most excellent life offered to humankind by the gods, both now and forevermore." The metaphysical informs how we should live. The universe moves in accordance to the harmonious design of the model, and so should our souls. The motions of our souls have been thrown out of whack by the disturbances afflicting our bodies, and it is by realigning the motions of our soul to be in harmony with the motions of the universe that we can live virtuous and happy lives. Following the same logic, we need to order our societies to follow the model of the universe. Often, when I first encounter ancient and medieval texts, it surprises me how much the thinkers of yore already knew, relative to the state of our knowledge today. It is as if some of our current knowledge had managed to find its way back to them, since some of their ideas seem rather advanced compared to other bits of their knowledge which might be somewhat laughable to our contemporary minds. Yet this is getting things backwards, where I have put us at the center and all others at the periphery. It is from their thoughts and work that we manage to have the knowledge we have today. This can only happen in two ways. 1. Their thoughts influence the development of subsequent thought, where their theories shape the ensuing discourse. 2. Even if their thought had been lost and only rediscovered later, too late to have influenced the development of modern thought, we as human beings thought across time in fundamentally the same ways. The thinking on the origins of the universe has in some ways advanced by leaps and bounds, unimaginable for the ancient thinkers. Yet in some ways it remains the same from thousands of years ago. Ideas such as a divine creator, the argument from design, the mathematical structure of the cosmos and all that it contains, the existence of the soul and its immortality remain with us today, even if some of them are disputed. I had in recent essays been musing on the nature of the soul. In particular, as I was thinking about Plato's theory of forms, it brought to mind Richard Maurice Buck's book on cosmic consciousness. In it, he related many accounts of the Illumination experiences of enlightened souls, among them Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. It is as if they had each connected on a deeper spiritual level with the cosmos. But what were they connecting with? Some of the accounts talk about how the enlightened can see through to the very heart of things, as if they are seeing things as they are in themselves, in their very essence. Socrates in Plato's Phaedo talked about how he did not regret having to die because he can then be released from the body, which, coherent with the Timaeus, prevented his soul from being able to understand the true forms of things. Is enlightenment a connecting to the realm of the eternal and perfect forms described by Plato? If not, what then are the enlightened connecting to? What is Timaeus referring to when he speaks about how we need to realign the motions of our soul to the harmonies of the motion of the universe? In his account, we already possess the key to this, since our soul at the start were aligned with the universe, as it was made of the residue of the soul stuff of the world soul, were here standing for all there is, or the cosmos. If the way to realign is to recognize and recalibrate to the harmonious motion of our undisturbed soul, is this what practices of going deep into ourselves are about? Stripping away all the noise around us and in our minds so that the initial motion of the soul can resurface, essentially the act of meditation. Having said all that, I am not accepting Plato's metaphysics literally. I think he is trying to aim at truth, but a truth that is not possible to directly know. He is making an intelligent guess at the nature of reality, trying to tell a coherent story that, because of its coherence and how it links up with the understanding of the world in his time, must have some elements of truth within it. The gods within the Timaeus are not the omnipotent, omniscient God of the monotheistic religions that we are familiar with today. His Demiurge did not create the universe from designs coming out of his own mind, but takes close reference to what is already a pre-established design of the model. Time began when the orbit has been set in motion by the movement of the world soul, but the forms and their realm are timeless. They are eternal, which means that they have always been as they are, unchanging, unmoving, and perfect. They in fact have to be unmoving and unchanging to be perfect. We, or any intelligent being, can only have any knowledge at all from what is unchanging. According to Aristotle's account of Plato's theory of forms, Plato came up with it because he was convinced as to the true nature of reality by the doctrine of Heraclitus, that all sensible things are always in a state of flux, so that if there is to be any knowledge or thought about anything, there must be certain other entities besides sensible ones which persist, for there can be no knowledge of that which is in flux. If something is continuously changing, an intelligent being will not be able to get a grasp of what it is, since it keeps changing. Continuous change is the state of things in the phenomenal world. But since we do have knowledge, it must be from a world that is unchanging, which Plato postulates as the realm of forms. It must exist because of the demands of logic. Plato is aware of the problems with his theory of forms. He himself problematizes it in his Parmenides. How the forms and its realm ontologically exist, Plato does not quite explain. Yet this realm is for him more real than the phenomenal realm, because it is one that is unchanging and eternal, compared to the temporal and ever-changing phenomenal world. For Plato, life and soul are intertwined. The cosmos is alive and hence has soul, as are other things which are alive. Other thinkers such as Aristotle and Henri Bergson are also in agreement on the connection between life and soul. For them, having a soul is the distinction between living and non-living things. However, others such as Arthur Schopenhauer and Charles Sanders Peirce subscribe to panpsychism, where all things, living or non-living, have souls. I am of the mind that souls are only found in living things, and if we want to attribute souls to objects such as rocks, mountains, or planets, then we have to account for why they are alive, such as the capacity for growth, reproduction, movement under its own power, intellect, etc. I do agree with Aristotle and Schopenhauer that there are degrees of soul. Where in Aristotle, this appears as a cumulative hierarchy of vegetative, sensitive, and rational soul, and in Schopenhauer, where the will has different levels of power, the will in a rock being less than the will in a human being. Though, as I had said, that extending it to non-living objects require further argumentation for its being alive. In short, it would mean that for panpsychists, everything is alive, making the distinction between living and non-living things a false one. One final reflection. The Timaeus is a work of metaphysics in its creation story, of science in its account of the elements and the body, and of theology in its account of the Demiurge and the lesser gods he created. Plato depends on teleology and theology to explain the creation of the universe. But I think Peirce's account of how even from out of randomness can come what later seems to be a structure of laws is a simpler and more rational explanation. Plato attempts to explain how order came out of chaos, but he never explained how the chaotic matter and the receptacle of space were there in the first place. If at the start we already have matter, chaotic as it may be, then Peirce has explained how from out of randomness, order can appear. It suggests that we can dispense with intelligent design as an argument, since order can surface out of chaos all by itself. Another possibility is that there is no order except the order we impose through our minds, which is the crux of George Berkeley's idealism and Immanuel Kant's critical philosophy. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.